bounds of the imagination, to literally become starlight. This metaverse will augment our minds and augment our world and finally allow us to show ourselves to ourselves.
Cool. We have the Econ team on stage. Welcome, everyone, to the Star Atlas Monthly Economic Forum. This is the second edition for the Economic Forum. And if you guys don't know what the Economic Forum is, it's basically a monthly event where our economics team analyzes the economy, they present data, and they sometimes tackle controversial topics when necessary. And we'll also answer questions for the community. As you know, and as we have said before, this is a big part of our effort to provide some better insight and balance the communication surrounding our economy. So equal access to information for everyone regarding the Star Atlas economics. So this is a big effort that we're taking, a big step on that side. And these events will happen the first Thursday of every month. So you can now, if you're interested in these shows, in these forums, you can now go to the very top of the server and mark as interested in this Atlas Economic Forum. And you can mark as interested for all the forums that will be happening. So let me quickly link this for everyone. I just linked it in the chat. You can mark as interested, and you will be pinged every time a new economic forum is happening. So with that said, we have our econ team here on stage. Let's introduce Chris first. Chris, how are you doing, sir?
Doing well, doing very well. Had a bit of a mishap with my Keurig before this, so I apologize for the tardiness. I'm excited for today.
It's all good. We were listening to some Star Atlas tracks. No worries. No worries. And we also have Gareth. Gareth, sir, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm excited for the second forum. First one was a big success. We have the quarterly coming out next week as well, so excited to tease a couple things from that. Excited to get started.
Nice. Yeah, let's get it going. I think you guys prepared some slides just like last time, correct?
That is right. Let me pull those up. And actually, I have a better idea. I'm going to put you guys over on this screen. And
You have many different screens, Chris?
Just two. So I have my ultra wide monitor, and then I have my laptop set up right next to it.
Nice.
Pretty sweet setup. I tried to do multiple monitors once, and I just hated like the breaks in the screen. It was kind of annoying to deal with, so I decided to go with just like one big fat monitor.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, cool. So thank you guys for attending. Obviously, a smaller crew for these. I would call this like a third tier presentation or event where it's very specific topic, very specific ecosystem. So the fact that we have almost we'll probably maybe hit 40 people in attendance. Honestly, I think that's a huge win. And I'm really happy to see all the people that are here. I know that I see a lot of prominent figures from the community here. So very, very happy to be here. And let's jump into the second monthly Star Atlas Economic Forum. So today we're just going to have three sections. The first section is going to be presented by me. The second section is going to be presented by Gareth, and then the third section is going to be presented. That'll be just kind of a Q&A section. Hopefully we'll have enough time at the end for that. So the topics I'm going to cover are basically just the main changes that have happened to the game over the last month or so. So these are refactoring the food upkeep requirements. And I'll go into detail on each of these changes once we get to that section. The SDU sector cooldown has been lowered. We've adjusted all the LP payouts for upkeep and upgrading actions. We have introduced a new LP auto contribution mechanic, which means that you can no longer deposit LP at your discretion. And then finally, the other big change is we've adjusted SDU requirements for upgrading, which has resulted in some fun, exciting events in the game. Then we'll go into a discussion, a little sneak peek of the quarterly report by Gareth, and then we'll finish with some Q&A. I've got a couple of topics pre-selected from different comments and questions I've seen in the community chats, but also we can definitely just hit up questions that come from the community. And as a reminder, if you have questions with the presentation, let's say I'm showing some sort of chart and you say, hey, I don't get what this chart is showing me, feel free to ping us in the channel and we'll be happy to explain that in more depth. So food requirement updates. For those of you who are playing the game and who have been following things closely in Sage Starbased, Starbased came with it 3 kind of major community slash kind of cooperative mechanics. So we had food upkeep, toolkit upkeep, and the LP mechanic for distributing Atlas. So food upkeep is required at a starbase in order to keep the crafting processes going. So if you run out of food, crafting stops, or at least that was the way it was in the beginning. Now, what we did was we decided that the mechanic wasn't quite acting the way we wanted it to. We wanted it to encourage cooperation. We didn't want it to punish anybody. And what we ended up with is, much like sole transaction fees, the food upkeep requirements are a fixed cost. So let's say you're a small player at a starbase that nobody else is at, you're pretty much not going to be able to craft at that starbase because it's impossible for you to produce the amount of food required to keep that starbase upkept. So let's say you want to do a craft job for 100 food, and that's going to take 100 seconds. Well, you need 100 seconds of upkeep at a tier, let's say you're at a tier 1 starbase. I mean, that's hundreds of food. So what we did was we ended up implementing a minimum speed for upkeep. So if a food coffer is not upkept at a starbase, the speed of crafting is reduced. So for a tier 1, it's reduced by 80%. So you're going 20% as fast. So a 5-second craft is going to take you, a 1 second craft is going to take you 5 seconds. And that kind of becomes less punishing the higher up the tier you go. So if you're tier 5 or 6, you're going to end up with only a 50% reduction. So what this does is it allows players who literally could not afford to upkeep a starbase without the help of a larger player are now able to craft at a reduced rate. But honestly, a 50% reduction in speed is much better than a 5,000% food cost, for example. So what we've seen is some really cool results. And these are exactly what we were hoping to see. We saw the mean deposit amount per player has started to accelerate. So you can see the mean deposit amount per day. I know this says hours. That was a mistake I found after I created the chart. But this is the daily mean contribution per player. Was floating around this 500,000 range before the update. We made the update in, I believe, mid-May. I'm not 100% sure on the exact date, but you can see that this average contribution has climbed to almost pretty much an average of 1 million per day. So we've seen almost a 2x average contribution. Now, much of this is due to the fact that smaller players are now just dropping out of the depositing food altogether. They're saying, why would I deposit food if I don't have to? I'd rather just get free, slower crafting. And so what you end up with is the mean contribution is still is growing because the smaller players are dropping out. Now, this might make you think, oh, because the players are dropping down, and you can see that here. Now the number of players depositing food is pretty much in line with the number of players depositing toolkits. We went from around this 400 range to now we're floating around 200. So what's happened is you've seen a bunch of players leave, and they're all pretty much the smaller players with smaller food deposit amounts. And you might be saying, oh, well, that must mean that the overall food consumption for upkeep is gone down. And that's actually not what we've seen. Well, there might be a slight negative trend here. You can see that the food deposit amounts, this is total deposit on the day. This is total deposit. So this is basically, you can see it's flat. What we've ended up with is larger deposits have compensated for the smaller players dropping out. So if you're a smaller player, you can, cheer for joy in the streets that now the bigger players are compensating for or subsidizing your crafting. Now, obviously, this kind of depends on which starbase you're at. It's quite possible that the players who are depositing these massive amounts of food aren't at the starbases that the smaller players are at. But it's really cool to see that the level of deposits has stayed relatively constant while the average amount has gone up and the number of users who have to upkeep has gone down. So that's the first update, the food requirement change. Very desirable figures that we have here to kind of show what we wanted to see. The next change, this is change number 2 that we want to talk about, is the SDU cooldown update. This was a relatively hidden, this was a stealth update. We kind of did this at the last second. Basically, we had decided it was between Michael Wagner, myself, and game design. We all kind of came to the same conclusion that we intuitively wanted another boost to SDU production. This was also, obviously this release came out with the big SDU mix-up change with upgrading amounts. We decided that this would help to also kind of alleviate some of the pressure in the SDUs for upgrading. So what you've seen is since that update, we've seen SDU's production climb from around 5 million to about 6 million, which is pretty cool. We were floating around 4 million per day before, and now we're at about 6 million per day. We'll see how this turns out because we've seen this jump in the last few days. So kind of curious how this is going to change. But yeah, SDU is growing, which is great. This is going to further probably put negative pressure on the SDU market in terms of their price, but SDUs were extremely scarce and overvalued in the pre-time, when we had RFRs and SDUs with a one limiting factor to the amount of Atlas was emitted. So that's the SDU cooldown update. So for those of you who don't know, there's a 10-minute sector cooldown for SDUs. Let's say each minute we have 2,000 SDUs that are available to deplete from that sector, and we kind of refill those every 10 minutes. So we moved that from 10 minutes down to 9 minutes. So the next change number 3, this is probably the biggest change in my opinion, especially in terms of how many different points it hits. So there was a lot of concern around field stabilizers. Every time a tier 2 starbase came out, the field stabilizers would be deposited and complete within 24 hours. So what you ended up with was these whales or bigger players who had a huge amount of field stabilizers saved up, and they would deposit those immediately and be able to reap all of the nice primo LP rewards. And you ended up with small players not being able to take advantage of that as well. So in order to alleviate this, we basically just reevaluated LP and tried to bring it more into balance. So if you're contributing frameworks or electronics or power sources, you're just as well off as if you're trying to contribute field stabilizers. Now, I'm not going to say that the balance is perfect. It'll never be perfect. The moment the price of something changes in the market, the balance will completely be off. But given what I've seen in the data and just some of the feedback, I think we're in a much better place than we were before. You can see field stabilizers, radiation absorbers, and particle accelerators have all seen both the largest absolute change and the largest relative change. So we've seen particle accelerators come down, they are 25% of what they were, whereas power sources have come up by about, I don't remember what the percentage is, but let's call it 15%. Electronics have come up about 10%. Electromagnets have come up about 6%. And then frameworks, I think, stayed exactly the same. Toolkits and food also saw a pretty nice, hefty bump. So we're pretty excited about this. This should hopefully alleviate some of the concern around, hey, I'm a small player and I can produce frameworks, but I can't produce field stabilizers, and field stabilizers are the better deal, so to speak. So this was a huge change, and we're quite happy with where we landed. That's not to say that the numbers are perfect, but the robustness with which our new game designer calculated these values was very satisfactory, both for Chip and myself. So we're happy with these numbers. The fourth change, auto LP contribution. So what we ended up doing was, in order to help kind of distribute LP throughout the day, throughout the 24-hour day, as opposed to having it all pile up at the end of the workday, or at the end of the epoch, we decided it'll be a little bit easier and more clear if we have people, their LP automatically contributes once they earn it, as opposed to being able to strategically place it. Because LP really is about, okay, you're getting rewarded for doing this task. It's not about, hey, you have this currency that you can now, push yourself around in this market. It's not really supposed to be some sort of a political currency, which it sort of started to turn into. So this is basically just to help to make the market for LP a little bit and Atlas a little bit more clear and a little more consistent. So, at 12 o'clock every single day, you have a much better idea of what your Atlas earnings are going to be than you did before, because before you have no idea if somebody's going to pump 10 billion LP into the pool right before the end of the end of the epoch. So with this change, we basically have deprecated the LP balance in an account. We're going to have LP for the purposes of the LP store in the future. We're still working out the details on how we're going to do that so that it's much more equitable, because the LP store is not supposed to be this place where you're using your wealth or currency in order to purchase, a powerful asset. It's supposed to be focused on partnerships. It's supposed to be focused on aesthetics, cool badges. And we don't want people with 100 billion LP to be able to purchase everything up. So we will come up with a permanent LP solution that you can use in order to activate the LP store, or sorry, in order to be active in the LP store. But the LP balances, these numbers, these are automatically going to be contributed from now on. And you can see ever since we made that announcement, I think it was on June 14th, but I'm not 100% sure, we've seen those numbers start to absolutely plummet. So we're going to see this number hopefully approach zero. I think there's going to be some speculators who say, "Ooh, I'm going to keep it balanced," because who knows? You never know. Maybe LP will be valuable someday. We saw that for golden tickets, and we've seen that for council RFRs. So we'll see what this balance does. But as of today, or I think this is yesterday, we're floating just around 60 billion LP, which is about 1.5 days worth of LP. The final change was SDU upgrading requirement changes. When we did the SDU change, there was a big update to how SDUs worked at the beginning of the release of Starbase. We vastly overestimated how many SDUs were going to be produced in the new meta. And that was mostly because of just kind of an inability to kind of forecast how certain systems would work out. So I got an estimate of about 15 to 20x increase, and so that was the number that I used to calculate the new numbers. Turns out it was actually more like 2x, 2.5x. So basically, what we did was we took down I think at the end of the day it was 6.2x reduction in SDU requirements, and as a consequence of that, we've seen 2 Starbases enter Tier 3 for the first time. MRZ4 and MRZ20 have both upgraded to Tier 3, which is really, really exciting. And you can see MRZ20 is actually already quite far along if you go in and look at those requirements. And then MRZ22 over in Ooster is close. I think they are sitting at around 60% SDUs filled, so they need some more SDUs. And if you guys don't recognize these symbols, this is from EVI. This is a website that I personally refer to. It's kind of a cool website. I don't, Star Atlas doesn't officially endorse it or anything like that, but a cool website to take a look at if you want to see how Starbases are doing. But yeah, that's kind of the updates for this month. And then I think we'll hop into Garrett's section, except for I might answer this question I see from Sasquatch.
Yeah, there's one question, just to read it here, Chris. So people will still be able to keep LP post June 5th, as in they won't be able to redeem it at all? I was under the impression that all will be auto-redeemed on that cutoff day.
So we will not, we have no ability to auto redeem the LP that is in your balance. So that is in your account balance. We don't have a way to spend that. We can deactivate that number. We can basically make it so that you can't interact with the LP deposit action. But no, we won't auto spend that LP. Plus, if you're a savvy player, you don't want, let's say you've got 1 million LP outstanding, you probably want to deposit that over time as opposed to on a single day. Obviously, it kind of depends. I'm seeing, yeah, I redeemed all mine. Yeah, so basically, once the 2 weeks is up, you'll no longer be able to redeem. You'll no longer. Okay, I see a lot of comments. You'll no longer be able to redeem. You won't be able to go in and deposit LP for Atlas. It's just going to, that part of the like interface is going to be deactivated. So let's say you have a balance of 10,000 LP. After the cutoff date, you will not be able to use that 10,000 LP.
Will it be burned or saved? They ask.
It's again, like I said, I'm not sure. Like, because these are blockchain programs, I'm not sure we have the permissions to be able to go into your account and burn that asset. I'm quite certain we won't be able to burn it, but it certainly won't be saved till later. So like this is me telling you guys, LP as it currently functions in your account balance will not be useful in the future. So I don't want to encourage people to save it. I assume there are going to be some people, no matter what, that are going to try and hedge and say, oh well, you never know, and they're going to hold a balance. But in the best case scenario, everybody spent all their LPs, so they don't feel bad, because they've got this LP balance. But yeah, it's much like RFRs or golden tickets. Like, those assets will never be used again. Even if we come out with similar programs or similar gameplay mechanics like RFRs and golden tickets, we won't use those same assets ever again. Yeah.
Cool. I think that's clear.
Anyway, and apologies if there's any sort of misunderstanding there. But yeah, the action will definitely not be available after the 2 weeks is up, which is probably soon.
Cool.
All right, thanks for that. The really good question, Sasquatch. Okay, without further ado, Wrath, you want to give them some a little sneak peeks?
Yeah, sure. So, as I mentioned before, quarterly's coming out next week. We are actually pushing it to Wednesday to line up with the town hall. So that'll be a cool little way of promoting it to a larger audience. So you guys can expect that on Wednesday. I am saving some bigger headline figures for that, but I did want to dive into a pretty important topic that's in line with the theme today of sort of general updates and ecosystem changes. So this first chart, pretty straightforward. Solana fees. Now, this chart specifically takes the mean paid on each day by Starbase players. Keep in mind it is a mean, so obviously larger players are going to skew this mean up. But generally speaking, since our large player base isn't going anywhere, the downtrend signifies that this is a decrease in aggregate fees overall. So between April and the end of June here, we are seeing about a 50% decrease in average fees paid on the day. Now, this was a big pain point for lots of smaller players operating with smaller fleets. Hopefully, that's alleviated. We haven't delved in yet quite on the micro level to examine, okay, which players are actually coming out on top as a result of these decrease in fees. But generally speaking, your margins on your production, crafting should all be improved since the beginning of the quarter. Now, Chris, if you move into the next slide here, we have two more figures. One on the left here, figure 19. This is the aggregated margin of all players in each faction on the day. So think of every cost and every value producing action. This is all captured here to sort of visualize the trend in the margin over time. So as you can see, that is trending up. We can see, again, since it is an average, it is affected by larger players who inherently have higher margins due to their efficiency. But the trend speaks for all players, and that is going up since the start of the period. On the right side, we see how the SOL fee has affected that margin as a percentage. So just for example, if we look at mid-April, we see that spikes go up to as much as 20% of the margin. So let's say you had a margin of 30%, you were making 30% of your Atlas. You spent 100 Atlas, you made 130 Atlas in return. The SOL fee was going to eat up 20%. So you'd normally make 150 without a SOL fee, but with the SOL fee, you're making 120 or 130. And that SOL fee infringement has decreased. So now you're only looking at about a 10% effect on the margin. And again, some players are going to feel this much more than others, and some players aren't going to feel this at all, given the scale of their operations. So overall, this is a fixed cost. I know Chris alluded that earlier, and we don't have much power to change this, other than maybe frequency of action. But ultimately, we want more frequency of actions within the game because more actions, more options for the player make a game more engaging. And since Starbase is on chain, we are sort of at the mercy of these SOL fees. Luckily for us, congestion has come way down, and with SOL decreasing in price, that has helped a bit. We also have bigger optimization programs like Jump Fire Dancer being developed on the Solana side. So all of this, hopefully sort of fixes itself over time. I'm sure we will see periods of increased SOL fees again. I have no doubt about that. But in terms of where we are now, the future is bright, and hopefully some of you guys have felt some of the relief here. And yeah, I did want to allude to one more thing. As I mentioned before, headline figures are being saved for the town hall and release of the report. But I know some of you guys, I'm not sure if you guys that were mentioning this specifically are in here, but we have changed the definition for the top 5 DACs. Before, it was based on aggregate activity levels. So basically participation, how many activities were you doing? Now, this was a pretty simple approach. It was hoping to capture the more engaged DAC, but we found that we were actually capturing DACs, specifically DACs like Xborg, that were botting and just basically spamming out activities. So the new definition, it's not in the slideshow, Chris, so don't worry about switching slides, but the new definition takes basically a top 5 percentile of output per player. So you'll see a few new names in the top 5. I won't spoil that now, but if you make it into that top 5, your activity is going to be visible in the report. We have stuff like the warping map, which people liked before. We also have the output distribution, and we also get into some of your guys' Atlas behavior. So you can look forward to that as well.
Oh, it gets spicy. It gets spicy. Shots are fired in the quarterly report. So
it can be interpreted however you want, but we just provide the visuals and give some context. You guys can determine who are the bad guys and who are the good guys. So something to again look forward to.
In the quarterly this month or this quarter, we're actually, I see a bunch of questions about when we're going to post it. Instead of posting it at the end of the month like we would normally post it this Friday, we're going to hold it off until I believe next Wednesday. Is that right, Gareth? In order to line up with the town hall. So if you guys want to hear more about the quarterly report, definitely come to the town hall. So we'll have Gareth up there giving a little breakdown of some of those spicy charts that aren't even here. But yeah.
Yeah, and don't worry, I won't take up much of the town hall time. I know most of you guys are excited for the bigger gameplay update, so I'll only be up there for a few minutes. But still, if you're interested, hop in, and you can expect the report to release on that same day.
Nice. Yeah, I'm loving this this SOL chart. This makes me really happy. Obviously, part of this is due to the fact that Sol has come down from like whatever it was, $200+, which helps, and obviously the relative kind of movement of Atlas compared to Sol is also going to affect how this feels to the player. But this is definitely a positive. We evaluated a whole bunch of options when we were experiencing those really high fees, and the unfortunate conclusion was, gosh, there's really just not much we can do. There was certainly nothing on the econ side we could do, and even on the engineering side, it was just not really feasible. So happy to see that things are kind of cooling off. In my view, if this month could be summarized, I don't know how the community feels, and we can get into that in this next section, the Q&A. But in my view, this has been a really good month for the smaller players. Between the LP changes, the Sol fees dropping, and the upkeep changes to food, I think it's been a really good month for them. So without further ado, if there are no questions about the stuff we've been discussing, I have two topics here that I've just kind of picked up on as I've been viewing the public channels in our Discord server, but also happy to discuss any questions you guys have, any concerns. Post them in the amphitheater, and we'll get to those. Maybe I'll start with this topic number one. This was brought up by Katir. I think he's from Rome. Did I just insult him?
He's not from Rome. From Phoenix.
Phoenix. Oh, even better. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding, Rome. Just kidding. So there was a really good question he brought up that basically in Starbase we've seen kind of the value. The value of like ships and fleets and basically the amount of wealth in the ecosystem has gone up. I honestly haven't really watched this. I haven't seen this in the data myself. So I'm going to assume that it's true just because of the purchasing we've been seeing and given the productivity levels in the data, I'm assuming we've also seen kind of like overall VWAP increase. But definitely happy to go and double check that figure in the future. We're a team of two, and we have a data engineer, Daniel. So I think it's an all-star team, but there's enough data here for an army of data scientists and data engineers. So we do what we can and we try and work through it as quickly as we can, but it's really just one foot in front of the other. So anytime we see like a new cool metric brought up by the community, that's something we want to look into. So I want to preface this with saying I haven't actually looked at the figures, but one of the things that was said is, hey, we've seen the VWAP in game increase since pre-Starbase from 10 million all the way up to 12 million post Starbase. And like I said, this would not surprise me. We've seen a lot of purchasing behavior. We've seen a lot of ships in Atlas being sold. We've seen a few ships sell out that honestly have been on the marketplace for quite some time. So it's been a really exciting quarter or even month. But with that comes a lot of value being poured into the ecosystem. And the question is, what about Atlas emissions? If before there was 10 million in VWAP in the game and Atlas emissions were 6 million, and now there's 12 million or maybe 20 million, and Atlas emissions are still 6 million. How does that work out? What are the consequences of that? And let me. Sorry, I'm trying to. I should not read the comments and.
I'll keep you posted in the comments there. Don't worry.
But it sounds good. So basically, the question is, well, if every Atlas is basically spread out across more and more and more value, what does that mean? So I have two kind of remarks that I wanted to add to this. The answer to this question is not easy, and there's no. I'm not going to provide you with the end all be all answer, but these are just my thoughts. So from a macro / monetary perspective, we can think of all the value bundled up in our ecosystem as being spread out across all the tokens in the ecosystem. So let's say there's $1 million and we spread that out across 100 tokens. Now there's $2 million, and we spread that out across 100 tokens. So if we think about this very classical monetary quantity theory of money model, which isn't necessarily like the end all be all of monetary policy, but it is a very helpful mental model. And that is basically you spread out the value across the number of units of the currency, and that's going to tell you what is the price per currency. This kind of reminiscent of the quantity theory of money. If we think about every single atlas as being, some sort of being a representation of the value in our ecosystem, if the value of the ecosystem goes up, you could imagine the value of a single token goes up as well. So that's kind of one of my hypotheses, is that along with an increase in the total, level of wealth in the ecosystem, we're going to see an increase in the kind of relative value of Atlas. Now, that's more of a hypothesis. That's this. If this was something that economists knew for a fact, there would be a lot less poverty in the world, and there would be a lot less currency fluctuation. So it's not necessarily a true thing. But one thing I want you to think about is, how does the current, let's call it the VWAP to the VWAP to Atlas, or the Atlas to VWAP, or the Atlas price to VWAP ratio, whatever you want to call this metric of how much is in the game compared to how much is Atlas worth. Let's suppose that Atlas spikes, up to 3 cents instead of 0.3 cents all of a sudden, our metric of VWAP in game to wealth or value of Atlas has completely fluctuated. So do keep in mind that and this is something I've been saying for quite some time, but the quantity of Atlas isn't really the important part. It's making sure that the value of Atlas is the thing that we care about. That's the thing we care about. How valuable is an Atlas? We could increase Atlas emissions based on the VWAP of a ship, or the VWAP in the game. And in a perfectly theoretical environment, we would see that price of Atlas basically stays steady, because for every additional dollar somebody spent on a ship, Atlas has been emitted at an additional dollar. So you kind of have this balancing effect. So that's like my more theoretical comment. Again, it's not like I don't have an answer for this concern. One other thing that I do want to mention is, like, realistically, yes, Atlas emissions are most likely going to have to vary. And I mean, there's a limited Atlas supply. Like the Atlas supply runs out in 2028. Is that when it runs out, or is it 2036? Anyway, it's going to run out eventually. And so that's when we're going to need to figure out what is a new monetary policy after that is done. I think the white paper estimated about 8.1 million Atlas to be emitted per day around this time period. So we're running a little bit under that, but we still have score emissions. So we're still seeing emissions from score. So, we're going to have to change tact. We're going to have to update the kind of monetary policy. Hopefully at that stage, though, we have, we're almost certainly going to have full DAO voting, like the entire PvP system is going to be online at that stage. So we'll be able to, cross that bridge when we do. So that was, I don't know if I did a good job answering your question, Katir, but hopefully that gives you my thoughts on the whole topic. See if there's any questions that have come in since I started my diatribe.
Chris, you're doing great out there, man. I got a question here from Ray saying, how much weight does the econ team give to DAX when looking at data? How much is considered and or worth considering? Do you guys have your own flip side of sorts for all data pertaining to DAX? 3-parter there.
Yeah. So I assume, and Gareth probably actually has an even better answer, but I assume by weight, Ray is talking about, like, when you're making decisions, how much do you consider that one DAC is more cooperative than another, or one DAC has more wealth than another? And the answer to that is the same answer that I'll give for when we're talking about big and small players. The policy changes that we had this last quarter, we didn't sit down in a room and say, how can we sorry, am I allowed to say the F word? How can we kneecap big players? We didn't sit around and say, how can we make the big players suffer, and so the small players feel better? We also didn't sit around and say, how can we make the small player bigger and better? And we sat around and we said, how can we make this system more balanced and and more, equitable. And I say equitable from an opportunity standpoint. I'm a capitalist. I'm an economist. I don't, I believe in opportunity and a person's ability to outcompete their opponent and get a better outcome. To me, that's extremely important. But we don't want to inadvertently kneecap certain players because they own a specific type of ship or they own a specific type of portfolio. So basically, all that to say, our job is okay. I believe in capitalism. I should say, like, I don't know if there's some sort of political context for capitalists, but I believe in capitalism. Like, I believe in the market. I believe in the invisible hand, so to speak. Anyway, I'm a classically trained economist. That's I have to say that. Anyway, so that's hopefully that's that's my my politician answer. Oh, we don't do anything to try and specifically target one person or another. And it's true. It's important to understand what's going on with the DAX descriptively. It's important to run the empirics and understand what DAC is. The metrics that Gareth provides are invaluable. In terms of understanding our player base, but we don't set out to specifically target one faction or another, or DAC for that matter.
Yeah, I was just going to mention DACs are like one level deeper than factions. So if we're talking about making decisions about a specific group of players, usually we're looking at the faction level. And even then, it's rare, given the fact that the changes we're making are more of fundamental gameplay changes as opposed to one faction having a advantage over another. DACs love to play the meta. They're all extremely unique in how they approach challenges and operations and specialization. So getting that granular can be very tricky, especially if, as Chris mentioned, we accidentally give one DAC an edge over another. So on top of this, to answer your question about how our data is sorted, our DAC data is basically ingrained within our broader Starbase data. We obviously have profile ID for every player in the game, and essentially a DAC, an associated DAC with that profile. And obviously there are many profiles without a DAC, but those that have one are essentially labeled in that respect.
Cool.
Sweet. I see another question has come through. Most people want to be in a world where your asset value plus time spent plus ingenuity is equal to fair wealth distribution. Ingenuity meta can be abused, which is why we have economic regulators. Does this align with your thinking? Yeah. So I'm a pretty firm believer that there are. Obviously, I believe in the open market and the free market, but there are undesirable equilibria that you can end up in certain markets. This is a fact. This is something we know about certain types of markets. I don't remember the type of game, but you could imagine setting up a prisoner's dilemma where. Sorry, my dog. My wife just got home. My dog is barking at her. He's probably trying to scare her away. I totally locked her outside. So I just realized the front door is locked. But
Just
she can
an
get
econ farm going on. She will have to wait.
she can get into the. Sorry, Sasquatch. I know. I'm just trying to be. I'm trying to be straight with you guys. So give the personal information. Anyway, so I do believe that there are types of markets that can be that can lead to undesirable equilibria in which one person or one entity has all the power. So this is like the monopoly problem, right? And we do want to avoid monopolies. That's my personal belief. Most economists would agree with that. The vast majority of economists would agree that monopolies are not good, and they can arise in certain markets and in certain mechanisms can help to make them arise. So So all that to say, Arthur, yeah, I do agree with you. I think that we need to make sure that we're making a market and a game that doesn't lead to an undesirable equilibrium where the best thing for somebody to do is to do nothing, or the best thing for somebody to do is to do something illegal or to cheat, right? So you can imagine us accidentally designing a mechanism that is abusable and going, that's okay. And we just leave it. And you end up with a bunch of potentially scammy people, abusing that one mechanism. It's not fun. And it's not good for the equilibrium.
There's another question, Chris from Dark Mark. Still wondering if the crafting fee gains can replace the LP Atlas supply. This way, the build of star bases would not be subsidized by Automata, but paid by the players and built by the players. A real economy sort of saying. Also, in this case, the LP pool will go up when more players join instead of the LP rewards going down percentage-wise.
Interesting. Okay, so I think what you're saying, Dark Mark, and please confirm, is that you've got all these crafting fees. We literally have, I want to say, anywhere from $500,000 to $1 million in crafting fees every day. That number might be inaccurate. In Atlas crafting fees, I believe crafting fees make up, it could be anywhere from 10 to 25% of the Atlas emissions every day. So what you're saying is, let's use that in order to supply the Atlas supply, as opposed to pulling that Atlas directly from the Atlas emissions. Wait for confirmation before moving on. Okay, so one thing I will say is the Atlas that is distributed in the game is not Automata's Atlas. It is the decentralized treasury of Atlas. I don't even think you should call it, I would call it a treasury, but it's the decentralized store of Atlas that has never been distributed. It's effectively not in supply. It's not supplied yet. So if Star Atlas had begun as a completely fully decentralized thing, which at this stage it's pretty impossible, but if it had begun completely decentralized, there would be some decentralized ethereal entity that would have started trickling this Atlas into existence. And Bitcoin is a really good example of this. There's no company, there's no entity that is distributing Bitcoin. Bitcoin gets distributed because of the program that was originally written to distribute Bitcoin. So every time a new Bitcoin comes into existence, it's not being provided by anybody. It is new. And this is naturally deflationary for the currency. So basically, all else equal, if you increase the supply of the token, you will end up decreasing the price of the token, which is inflationary for assets bought with the token. So that's a little bit of confusing jargon there. But so I don't know if it's fair to say that it would be more sustainable to not pull from the Atlas unsupply, or the supply that is not outstanding, because it's not like we're spending Atlas in order to get the game. This is new Atlas that's coming into existence, and it's very much a bootstrapping process, right? If we were to, let's suppose we ended up with 1 million players. There's only 36 billion Atlas that were, is it 360 billion? I always get those confused. I think it's 360 billion Atlas. So let's say we've got 1 million players. That's 30. My mental math is not going to do super good right now. But you can imagine there's like a limited amount of each token per person. And at our current supply, that's not a lot. So we want to provide plenty of tokens so that it's a liquid market. We don't want like the liquidity of we want the liquidity of Bitcoin. We don't want the numbers in Bitcoin, because this is a game economy, and we want millions and millions of Atlas to be traded every single day for millions and billions of items. Very similar to the way that the EVE Online economy works. So it's important that there are a large number of those tokens distributed, and the Atlas emissions curve kind of helps us to get to that point. But I totally agree. I think what you're getting at is a much more long-term vision of, hey, what comes into this economy is just, Joe wants to come in and spend money, and maybe he buys a primary ship, and that's increasing the size of the economy. But if he buys a secondary ship, that's just one person exiting and another person coming in. So it's like a clean wash. It's almost a zero sum. And I think what you're getting at is that really, in order to be fully kind of sustainable, and I'm in agreement with this view, you do want kind of a zero sum environment where what comes in must go out and vice versa. What goes out must have come in the first place. You can't just generate value out of nowhere. And that's why increasing the token supply, increasing the emission rate of Atlas isn't a sufficient solution to trying to increase the value of the ecosystem. So long-winded explanation as usual. Hopefully that kind of gave you some of my thoughts, Darkmark.
Cool. Any extra questions, guys? Chris, I don't know if you covered the point number 2 here, but
yeah. It says econ side of 2.2 will be strong, or it will just be for fun for now. TBD on that, Katir. I see a question. Actually, that's DeSanti. Never mind. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I replied with I don't think late turn will be enabled on 2.2, so we will see.
Yeah,
We will
probably
see.
not in a major way.
Yeah.
But yeah. Okay. So yeah, this is a very broad question, and I love to do a little bit of theory crafting, and I love to put ideas out there for the community to chew on, because it helps us to gauge the interest of the community. In a perfect world, we would have some sort of a voting mechanism or something, but this is kind of this is a way for us to get a feeling for what people would prefer. So I'm going to throw some stuff out here. This is kind of me going off the script, but the question has come up a few times. What's going to happen once all the starbases are upgraded? We're going to see a tier 4 starbase probably in not too long. We've seen an insane. If my data is correct, we've seen an insane amount of SDUs flooding into starbases recently. In particular by the Ooster faction, which I think is really interesting. It's so dramatic that I'm wondering if it's an anomaly. But yeah, so we're seeing a ton of SDUs coming in, which is going to level up a bunch of starbases. So what happens when all the starbases are upgraded? In a perfect world, we have gotten to a point where starbases can be deconstructed by the opposing faction before this happens. So basically war, blow them up, destroy. That's my hope. My hope is that we have war, famine, and destruction by the time the starbases are upgraded. But realistically, we're working on a lot of different stuff, and in particular, some projects that are going to be massive improvements to the game that are potentially going to take precedent over like destruction of starbases. So let's suppose we can't get starbase deconstruction out by the time starbases are upgraded. I'm not saying we're not going to. I'm just saying, what if we don't? In my view, there are a couple of options, and I'm just honestly just going to kind of throw them out there. So one option is to introduce an unlimited upgrade tier. So if you hit tier 5, we basically open unlimited deposits for frameworks, all the different upgrading materials. Upkeep isn't going to be a problem because that's you kind of still are going to need that to be able to operate. But basically an unlimited tier where we can still have the LP and the Atlas emissions loop, but we've stopped upgrading starbases. Now, I'm not a huge fan of that one. It feels weird. It feels awkward. And it feels kind of anti to the purpose of the game. So there's an alternative that would be essentially to reintroduce a similar mechanism to RFRs. Now, how this would work technically, I won't get into, but basically more of hey, turn this thing in for a fixed amount of Atlas. So a couple of different options. Those are two of the ones that are top of my mind. And just kind of hopefully some fun theory crafting. Let me read these comments to see if anybody has anything interesting. Yes, I am Jose. Actually, there's a question about the tier bonuses. You guys should know the tier 4 and tier 5 bonuses, I believe. And if you don't, I can share those later. But yeah, as the tiers of the star bases go up, I think once it's all said and done, if all the star bases are leveled up, I think the emissions go to just around 8 million as opposed to 6 million. Actually, maybe it's 7.5 million. But yeah, so obviously Atlas emissions are going to start to increase as we get more and more updated star bases. Let's see, war, famine, destruction. I'm to infinite tiering. All man must do is upkeep. So anyway, I don't see a strong desire one way or the other, but it's all that. I guess the important takeaway here is it's something we're thinking about, and it's something we're aware that could happen. I'm hopeful that we can get in a change before this happens, or an update or an upgrade to the game that'll allow us to deconstruct star bases. You can imagine a couple of primitive ways in which you could fight opposing factions. Like, what if the infinite upgrade tiers are actually a way to reduce the upgrading of another starbase? So you start to like upgrade your like MRZ22, and that unupgrades MRZ20. So the Oni faction is able to fight against the Mud faction in that way. So that's a little bit more into the game design direction, but definitely something that I'm thinking about. Component crafting. Oh, I totally agree with this. Component crafting for ships, that would be cool. A really great way to sync resources. Crafting ships. This is a really good point, and obviously we've got the Max Hog recipe. We have the Mamba X recipes, both active in the game with limited supply for now. I think the total outstanding supply that is available to craft and has ever been available to craft is around 15% of the supply of those tokens. And so we still have more of those to craft. Those are craftable only items. Those will never be sold. So that's a really good kind of good way to handle some of this. But infinitely increasing the supply of ships into the ecosystem is not necessarily the most sustainable, especially without the full suite of ship crafting and component crafting mechanics that we're supposed to have, like blueprints and leveling and progression, account progression, stuff like that.
I see a question about the blinks. Can we open Max Hog's dealership in X Twitter?
Yeah, you do whatever you want.
I think you can.
Yeah.
Like, you totally can.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm excited to see what we get, what kind of blinks we get.
Yeah.
Sick.
Same. Let's see if there are any more questions. We're actually at the hour, Chris, and we have a call right now, actually. So probably need to close here. Any closing thoughts? Anything that we need to share, Chris, Gareth, before we close?
I think that's it for me.
Yeah, that's everything. There was a question about the DAU in Starbase, specifically where that data could be found publicly. If you guys go to Flipside, I'm sure one of the APIA dashboards or Stardust dashboards has it. I did paste some code in there as well. Not sure. This was a while ago. I'm not sure if I wrote that myself or got it from one of the builders of the dashboards. But if you plug that in, make a Flipside account, launch the Flipside Studio, create a new query, and plug in that code, you'll get a per date DAU in Starbase, daily active users. So if you guys want to go mess around with that, you're more than welcome. It's in the Atlas Amphitheater chat.
Nice. Well, thank you guys. Thank you, Chris, Gareth, for joining, for putting together this economic forum, and for the audience again. Thank you for joining. and we will be hosting one of these at the beginning of each month. So let me share the link here in the chat so you can mark us interested. And if you mark us interested in the link that I just shared in the chat, you will basically get a notification every time a Stratlas Economic Forum is happening. So make sure to mark us interested so you don't miss any of the upcoming economic forums, and we'll see you. We'll see our econ team and audience at the town hall for sure, because Gareth will be speaking there as well. So thank you everyone for joining, and we'll see you on the next one.
See you guys.
Thanks, guys.
See you guys.
Thank you. Bye bye.